You are joining us on a wonderful Google Hangout with Dr. Nikki Woodson. Dr. Nikki Woodson, she is the superintendent of schools for the Metropolitan School District of Washington Township in Indianapolis, Indiana. And she's also, of course, a Leadership Institute faculty member. She is a featured speaker at AMLE 2015 in Columbus that just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago. And she's also the author of another wonderful leadership-oriented article entitled Supporting the Middle Level Learners at Your School. So thank you, Dr. Woodson, for being with us this morning.
Of course. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome, awesome. We know your time is precious, so we're going to get right to the meaty questions. So here they go. Number one, why is it so important for middle-level leaders to be well-versed in the world of data and information?
Yeah, I think most educators nowadays, when they hear the word data, they almost cringe because it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose when it comes to data in education. We aren't lacking data. What we're lacking is meaningful data to really inform instruction. I think a lot of times when you talk with teachers, practitioners in the classroom about what data is actually useful for them day to day to gear their instruction, you will find only a few pieces of the data, of the hundreds that they have, are actually used to guide their instruction day to day. And so it's a matter of finding what's impacting practitioners, not just to check off a box for school improvement plans or what have you, but what's actually informing instruction. Certainly we have to do data pieces and assessments that are required by the state or by federal funding, and there's nothing we can do about those. But if you put on a big chart in your middle school, all the assessments that you have control over, and then begin to ask critical questions from practitioners about which ones of these posted actually impact and inform your instruction every day, you can begin to weed through to get to the highest yield data pieces that you have at your middle school.
So you mentioned the phrase, data rich but information poor. I love that that expression. I think, and this topic is very timely too. Is a lot of discussion in the news recently about testing and its place and reducing the amount of testing. So
from the White House even.
Yeah. So a lot of big questions out there about the purpose of data and how we're using it. And you have some really spot on questions in your article itself, and all those reflective questions, like I said, are top shelf that you think middle level leaders should ask themselves when it comes to data. And I know this is difficult sometimes to choose just one, but if you had to choose one of those bulleted questions, which one is particularly critical for leaders to consider, and why would that question be so critical?
Sure. These questions are specific to support systems in middle schools. Mm-hmm. And so these are reflective questions when you look at all the myriad of supports and pyramids and RTI systems, whatever you have in your middle school, how can you reflect on those systems? And so the one I would say is the most important, the least reflected on in my experiences, would be, how do you know the support system is being effective? Mm. And so I think, and I've seen in my 20 years experience in education, a lot of time spent on determining which support system we want to implement, and spending 6 months in a committee determining, are we going to go with reading program ABC or reading program XYZ? And a lot of work spent on the choosing. And then we do a great deal of work on professional development. So we choose the support system, then we will develop the teachers and the staff, but then we seem to lack on reviewing and progress monitoring the effectiveness of that support system once implemented. And I think that is a crucial reflective step for any middle school in their deployment of support systems. And we all have them.
Right. That progress monitoring piece is essential, especially if we're talking about RTI or whatever kind of multi-tiered system of support that you have. But yeah, progress monitoring is key to seeing if something is effective. So good job. So, and again, thank you too for sharing some really stellar examples of effective support systems in your school system in particular, focusing on the leadership characteristics. What in your opinion, have those leaders done to establish, maintain, and grow effective support systems for their young adolescents?
Sure. the two leaders I chose have a proven track record of creating a culture in their school of all-in supports for students. And so you will have leaders themselves deploying supports for students, not just observing or overseeing supports. They will deploy the supports themselves. And you have them wrestling with teachers on the appropriate supports or making changes to supports based on progress monitoring. And so I like to think of our cycle that we use in Washington Township as a quality assurance system is the term from the business field that we use. But it's progress monitoring. It's a fancy term for progress monitoring. And I like to think of it that every time a child gets a report card to take home, whether that's every 6 weeks or 9 weeks, whatever that is for your middle school, that's how often you should formally progress monitor your support systems. And so as a child gets a grade card, you should also get a support system review internally with the appropriate staff, of course, of whatever systems if you've implemented. And that's what these leaders do on a consistent basis. So obviously, in order to give a report card on a support system they have in their school, they have to keep track of data. They've got to talk to teachers and practitioners so that at the end of that 9 weeks, they are able to give some leadership reflective questions and determine if that support system is having an impact for the supports that it was designed to give to students at the middle level.
Well said. Goodness gracious. That was such a succinct way to talk about such a really a complicated process in some ways, very complex. I mean, not complicated, but complex.
Yes,
but clearly it's well within your wheelhouse, so you could talk about it so seamlessly. And you know, what resonated with me in particular was a couple of words, and they all begin with the letter C. So that consistency, so it's not just about a one-time implementation, or maybe we do it sometimes, but that consistency that those leaders put out there, and then that communication that once you have it, but you have the data, you're talking to people about it. And then I think those ingredients, and others of course, create that culture that you mentioned at the beginning. So culture isn't just something that kind of happens organically, but there are specific strategic things that need to take place in order for a culture to grow. So clearly those two leaders are doing it, thanks to your leadership too.
Well, and, it's not all roses. I don't want to create a beautiful picture here. Creating that culture comes with bumps in the road. And so we've got to monitor from the leadership level the different road bumps that come along the way, because they will happen, especially when you're talking about designing supports for a wide range of student needs that we have in our middle schools.
Excellent. And since you used such an apt metaphor for, you know, road bumps and that kind of stuff, it's time for a metaphorical question about this whole topic, Nikki. See what you did? All right, so our final question to wrap it up is food-based, of course. That's just the passion of mine.
Of course.
If student support systems were a food for middle-level education, what kind of food would they be and why?
If student supports at the middle level, they would have to go into a slow simmer crock pot in the form of a stew, because stew has lots of ingredients and it takes a lot of strategies to support our students at the middle level with support systems. And with stew, we've got to let it cook over a period of time. So it's nothing that's rushed and takes time. And you kind of have to taste it every now and then and change up your spices or your ingredients to get it to be the taste that you want. So I think stew in a slow simmer crock pot would be the perfect analogy to a food for our student support systems at the middle school.
Oh, goodness gracious. That was wonderful. And a nice dish at this time of the year here in autumn, as it's getting a little chillier. It's nice to have a warm dish. You got to serve data up and support systems up in a warm fashion. I'll tell you what, I'm bowled over by your answer. Bowled over by your answer, and that wasn't a crock of an answer. I'll tell you what, that was a good one. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you, Dr. Woodson, for taking the time to talk with us more about this article. It's another critical conversation about how to grow great middle schools and great school systems like your own. Thank you so much for the article, and thanks so much for the conversation today.
Of course, always pleased to support AMLE and all they're doing for middle level educators.
Oh, thanks so much. And of course, thank you AMLE magazine readers for checking out the article and checking out this Google Hangout as well. Here at AMLE, where we help you reach every student, grow professionally, and create great schools. All right, thanks again, Dr. Woodson.
My pleasure.
All right. Bye.